Welcome to Betting Weekly Tennis Live. I'm Rory Jiwani. With me, Tim Dennis. Going to have a look at some of the in-play action in the Eternal City. We've got the Masters event in the men qualifiers today. The women's main draw got underway today. Got a couple of in-play matches still going on the women's side. Sonia Cartal serving for the match against Kimberly Burrell. She dropped the first set, the Briton, but she's 5-4 up in the second and serving for the match. She's actually just gone 15-love, minus 2,000 to win. And the other one, Marie Bauskova against Maya Sherif. Bauskova, a set and a breakup. She's 6-5 up. She's just broken to take the lead, so she's now serving for the match. Bauskova, minus 14.30. Sherif, the Egyptian, $8 to come back and win that. And Bauskova's gone even shorter because she's won the first point of that 12th game in the second set. We've actually got one qualifier as well in Rome on the men's side between Thomas Barrios Vera and Valentin Royer. That's in the third set, going with serve at the moment. Royer minus 195 and Barrios Vera plus 140. Of course, you can watch all the action live streamed and bet in play with Bet Rivers. Tim, I guess you've been watching some of the action today. Anything caught your eye?
Hi, Rory. Yeah, great to see you. Yeah, I've watched a few of the games. I watched a bit of Cam Norrie earlier. Little bit of a surprise to see him get beat by Dusan Lajovic, although Lajovic does have I think a 3-1 head-to-head record now with that victory over Norrie today. So, I mean, on a surface he likes, he would have been reasonably confident coming into that game. Although we did see Norrie play some quite decent tennis last week, and I thought he might be able to get through that today, but Lajovic had other ideas. And yeah, on a day of not many shocks, and that's probably not a huge shock, that's probably the one that stood out to me, I thought.
For me, a bit of a surprise to see Norrie and Lajovic in qualifiers. Their stock's fallen quite considerably. I've got Norrie won a 1,000 not all that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, with watching Norrie last week, I thought he was coming back to perhaps not quite those heights, but maybe building a little bit towards something. So I think he'll be disappointed to be going out so early. He might have felt he could have built on last week and gained a little bit of momentum, but he was obviously one of those players who looked like they had Diallo beat, not for the first time last week, and ended up coming up unstuck. So yeah, hopefully something he can build on, I'm sure.
Yeah, just to report, Cartal now has match point. She's 40-30 on serve against Kimberly Burrell. And Bauskova's 30-15 up on Maya Sherif in the other women's match. In the men's qualifier, I mentioned Barrios Vera against Royer. Continuing to go with serve. That's 2 games all in the deciding set. So it's Rome, Tim. For me, obviously, someone who follows the women's game, this is a tournament I quite like, because all the clay court tournaments before this in Europe have not really been the sort of traditional slow clay, because you've had Stuttgart indoors and you've had Madrid at altitude. Now, for me, this is more like a sort of proper warm-up for the French Open. But I don't know, it just feels like you don't really have... I remember going back years, you had the clay court specialist, particularly on the men's side, likes of Gustavo Kuerten springs to mind. It's not really the case nowadays, is it?
It doesn't seem to. Whether that's with players, the fitness levels are far higher than they perhaps used to be, or the talent is wider spread amongst the crop. Difficult to perhaps answer that question. You look at guys now like Jack Draper, obviously doing pretty well on clay, whereas 12 months ago you would have probably put a line through him coming into these kind of events. So I think the talent pool is spread out a lot wider than perhaps it was of years gone by. Whether that is, like I said, due to fitness, or whether that's just all-round pure talent. It's great to watch, because we can see these guys competing on all sorts of different conditions and courts.
Absolutely. Bauskova has won against Maya Sherif 6-2, 7-5. For the Czech, she is through to round 2. And Cartal has another match point against Kimberly Burrell. Let's have a look at some of the matches tomorrow on the women's side. Up on your screen there. The first one, Sara Errani against Naomi Osaka. Errani, of course, a slam finalist. I have to go back a long time before she when she reached the French Open final. Now, Errani, big outsider here. Osaka actually had some success after an early exit in Madrid. She went to the Challenger in Sao Malo and won that. And that's her first, I mean, it's a Challenger, so not on the WTA tour, but that's her first tournament win since she had a maternity break. Errani's just won one singles match out of 4 on clay this year. And of course, this is her best service. And I suppose one thing to note, in their 2 previous meetings, one was in Miami back in 2016 and one was Indian Wells last year, Osaka dropped just 4 games in each of those matches. It probably will be quite one-sided, this, won't it?
You'd imagine so. There's probably a couple of ways to look at this. You've obviously got Sara Errani, 38 years old, and this is perhaps her swan song on back in her home country. And then you've got Osaka, like you say, coming back off victory at Challenger 125 level. The fact she had to, whether she just wanted to try and get a victory, having to drop to that level. Obviously, she's done that. So yeah, there's 2 ways of looking at this game. Do you think Errani can perhaps lift her game one last time against Osaka, who's obviously coming back and might have had a couple of quite easy days and might try and build her way into a tournament? But yeah, the way I saw this game was that Osaka would probably take care of business fairly comfortably. Errani's just 2 from 7 win-loss this year. Both of those wins coming in quali. Not even got a victory in a main draw event. Naomi Osaka did really well here last year. She beat Kostyuk, Kazakina, both in straight sets before losing to Qinwen Zheng in the last 16. Obviously, before then going on to give Iga Swiatek a mighty scare at Roland Garros. And yeah, the way I saw it was, even if Errani does erase her level in front of a patriotic home crowd, I thought Osaka would probably take care of her fairly comfortably, and half of my daily double was going to be involved in this match. I think BetRivers offered, when I looked earlier, it was -109 on under 6.5 total games for Sara Errani. So yeah, even if she outdoes herself on previous efforts and takes 6 games off Osaka, you'll still cash that bet. So I thought that was probably a good way of looking at the game from my point of view.
Yeah, interesting. Sometimes I struggle. I know, back in the past, I used to bet a lot on set scores, like 6-loves and 6-1s, when I thought it would be very one-sided. And the game's changed a lot since then. I mean, there's a much deeper talent pool. Players who are sort of ranked outside the top 60 or 70 are much more competitive than they used to be. But it can be quite hard to find a bet in these matches where you think someone's, unless you've got a view on a match that the bookies don't have that one-sided, is close, but you think it's going to be one-sided, then you can find a bet. But when the bookies agree with you that it's going to be very one-sided, I sometimes find it very hard to find a bet. But I think one of the men's matches we looked at a couple of weeks ago, you played the unders games, like, for one of the players. Is there a strategy of using that instead of going for the spread for you?
Yeah, I think so, because it's a market I quite like, because especially if you think you're gonna, I mean, you can look at the prices of a 2 sets to love win might be quite a bit shorter than perhaps the total games. And if you think they're going to get it done in straight sets, and also if you think they're going to get it done comfortably, i.e. there's not going to be a tie break or both players get into 5, so technically neither player has to get to 7 games. That's kind of an angle I quite like to look at, because then the lines are sort of over 12.5. So if you think they're going to get it done comfortably and not get to, I mean, even if they get to 4, as long as they break at 4-5 or 5-4, then you're going to get your chance there. So that's kind of where I like to go. And you do have a little bit of a safety jacket with this one. If just your player has a complete off day and they get turned over 2-0, then you can be completely on the wrong side of the bet and still cash. So that's you can get extremely fortunate if that happens, and you'll be made to look quite silly, but you'll still end up with the money in your pocket.
Always good. Let's look at the next match in tomorrow's schedule. Marketa Vondrousova making her return after a couple of months out with a shoulder injury. The 2023 Wimbledon champion, of course. She was last seen in Dubai, losing to eventual winner Mira Andreeva. She's up against Xinyu Wang, who's the right-handed Wang, as opposed to left-handed Xinyu Wang. She's lost her last 3 matches in straight sets, including to Maria Sakkari in Madrid. Vondrousova's -245, Xinyu Wang +190. Spread 4.5 games and totals 20.5 games. I don't know if, I'm a bit worried for Vondrousova here. First match back looks a little short to my eyes, although she is the better clay court player.
Yeah, agreed. That's the first thing that struck me when I looked at this. I thought she was very short. You're taking a lot on trust there. Like you said, she hasn't played since Dubai, and that was on the 19th of February. So she's obviously had injury issues. And Wang, like you say, lost the last few games, but was very competitive against Sakkari, going down 6-4, 7-6, and probably had chances to take that second set. And yeah, looking at Vondrousova, actually, she didn't play obviously since Dubai, but she only played in Stuttgart and Madrid before losing to Cirstea here in round 2 last year. And then so to think, I think it's a little bit more to it though than not just coming to play a couple of clay games with the injury setback. So I think you'd have to be quite brave getting on the money line there. The lean I did have in this was Wang, I think +4.5. She was -139 was probably the way I was looking at on there. I thought that was probably quite fair, really, because you're taking a lot on trust with Vondrousova. I mean, she can be quite comfortable on this surface, but I mean, Wang's got a clay match already under her belt, and you're going to have to take a lot on trust with Vondrousova. So yeah, slight lean with Wang would be with the handicap start, was how I saw that.
Yeah, we've seen obviously Vondrousova coming back from injury. Karolina Muchova due to come back from injury as well here in Rome. The 2 Czech players who are obviously very, very capable on their day, but just seem to be dogged by injury. I mean, Muchova's a player who I really, really like.
You're a big fan, Rory, aren't you? I think Muchova.
I am. And, she reached the Roland Garros final a couple of years ago. But it's just, she's just injured so often. It's very, it's really sad for her, obviously. And for me, it's quite sad. I think she's a great player to watch. And I think she adds a lot of variety to the game. But, generally for players coming back from an absence, do you tend to fade them, Tim?
Until I've seen them play, I'd certainly take a watching brief. I think, like I said, with this game, I'd probably go with handicap starts, because, I mean, if they come out and they're all guns blazing and they wipe their opponent off the floor, then you just have to probably say, okay, you're too good, and that's fair enough. But I mean, like we said with Wang for this particular example, she's already played a game reasonably recently on clay. Yes, she lost to Sakkari in a tight one, but she's got a game under her belt on the surface. Granted, it wasn't in Rome here, but and yeah, I think you just have to take a lot on trust with Vondrousova. She's clearly going to be not quite 100%. I think that has to be almost factual, and she will try and obviously win this match, but build her way into the tournament if she can, because she will want to get some games under her belt before Roland Garros, and this might be a way of starting it. But I think if you're going to take more trust with Wang with a start, that's the kind of way I would look at these kind of games with players coming back from long injury. It's a lot to take on trust to probably get involved on Vondrousova, A, on the money line, and B, giving up a start off such a break.
Yeah, it can bring you up to date. Sone Cartel is through. She's beaten Kimberly Burrell 6-4 in the third, so she is through to round 2. The live match, the one remaining live match, it's a men's qualifier in Rome. That's going with serve still in the third set between Tomas Barrios Vera and Valentin Royer. 3 games apiece there. Royer, the favourite, he is serving first. So unsurprisingly, he's favourite. Just gone 15 love. He's -143. And Barrios Vera is +108. Of course, you can bet in play and watch that live on Bet Rivers. Let's look ahead to our final women's match taking place tomorrow. Caroline Dolehide of the United States. She's -103 against Sorana Cirstea. -121. The spread 1.5 games, totals 21.5 games. Cirstea, who, we know she's a good clay court player, but fell at the first in Madrid to Hailey Baptiste, which I think Baptiste was the favourite with the bookies, but I thought I had a feeling for Cirstea there, but Baptiste won that one. Dolehide had a good win over Elena Avanesian in Madrid and then fell to Lyudmila Samsonova. Like Osaka, she played in Saint Malo, but she lost to Leah Jean, the French woman. But Cirstea, don't know, I've just got the feeling, because she had a bit of a revival a couple of years back, I just get the feeling that maybe age is catching up with her, perhaps.
Yeah, possibly, and it's interesting to see this is only her second match on clay this year. She's just played once in Madrid, having quite a tough hard court season in Miami. I saw her play a few games there. I think a game I took out of it, she actually lost in 3 sets to Emma Navarro one evening when I was watching, and I thought she very quite easily could have won. And I think she's still got enough game to probably win this, was the way I looked at it. Last year she only played three matches before coming here. I think 2 of those were in Madrid and 1 in Stuttgart, before she lost to Keys in round 3 here. The way I probably saw this game was, like you say, even with Dolehide having a nice victory over Avanesian, I think Cirstea will be the more comfortable here, and the way I thought she was the more solid one. Yeah, looking at -121, obviously she's favourite of the 2, but I certainly thought she was probably the more solid of the 2, and that was where I was looking in this match.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mentioned it earlier. Of course, this is slower clay than Madrid. You don't have the altitude, so someone like Dolehide, who does like to hit winners, is going to find that a bit more difficult here, isn't she? Whereas Cirstea is a bit more of a bit more of a clay court specialist, and probably likelier to stay in the rallies a bit longer, perhaps.
Yeah, like you say, and she actually beat Vondrousova here last year. We spoke about Vondrousova already today, before losing to Keys in the next round after that. So she's reasonably comfortable on this surface in this atmosphere, and I just thought of the 2, she was the more solid of the 2, and I thought the market reflected that, and I thought that was just about right.
So there we go. Tim likes Sorana Cirstea against Caroline Dolehide. Bring you up to date with the 1 match in progress. Still going with serve. Royer has held for 4-3 against Barrios Vera. Royer -195, Barrios Vera +140. 2 men's matches to look forward to tomorrow. Now, we hope they're going to be tomorrow. We haven't seen the order of play, so these matches could be tomorrow, or they could even be on Thursday. But these are the 2 we've picked out. Of course, earlier today we had Sean Calvert and Nigel Seeley looking at the futures markets and at some of the first round matches. Make sure you watch that one. We've obviously tried to avoid matches that they've looked at, and the first one is Jiri Lehecka against Alexandre Muller, and Lehecka quite a heavy favourite here, -210. Muller +165. The spread 2.5 games, total 22.5 games. Muller had a better Madrid of the 2. He got an injury retirement win over David Goffin, beat Ugo Humbert, and then fell to Francis Tiafoe. Lehecka fell at the first to Cam Norrie, who we spoke about earlier, Tim. He did beat Seb Korda in Monte Carlo before going out to Musetti. Lehecka's won both their previous meetings pretty comfortably in straight sets, although they were back in 2021. The first was on clay in Salzburg, and then he won 6-1, 6-4 at the US Open. But on form, it's not much between them, is there?
No, I thought Lehecka -210 was plenty short. Obviously, Lehecka, he lost to previously mentioned Cam Norrie in Madrid, having taken the first set 6-2 and playing some pretty decent stuff. And then, he only won 4 of the next games of the rest of the match. Norrie actually bageling him in the final set, which was probably a real shock for him, and certainly a shock for viewers. interesting. So Marozsan is also on that caption because Lehecka lost here in the first round to Marozsan here last year. I think he clearly prefers it quicker, and Muller would be the other way around. He made it through qualies last year before losing to Jiri in the last 16. On his way, beating Fuskovic, Arthur Fils, and Andrei Rublev. So clearly comfortable here. Had a good Madrid, like you say, and I think these conditions will suit him better than Madrid. He lost there to Francis Tiafoe, where I think it was previously spoken in games that Tiafoe might just have a bit too much power of him there. And you could say the same Lehecka, but I think in this court will play a lot more to Muller's advantage than it will Lehecka. And yeah, I was definitely leaning towards Muller looking at value. And I probably thought Lehecka clearly capable, but I probably thought, the way I looked at it, I thought this could probably go all the way to 3 sets. And this was the one game that made up the second part of my double, if you like. Yeah, I liked plus 2.5 sets in this match. Was a plus 140 chance with Bet Rivers, which I thought was good value. We saw Lehecka play some, like we said, great tennis there against Norrie in the first set before, yeah, simply imploding to Norrie. And Muller's going to do a fairly similar job, I think. I think he's certainly capable of being competitive. And I see this going long, and I thought over 2.5 sets at plus money was the way to go here.
So there you go. Expecting a long one there. I mean, from what you've seen today, and it's hard to tell, the eye test isn't always accurate. Does it look a bit slower here in Rome than Madrid did?
I think certainly so to Madrid, and the figures back that up with your first serve points won and amount of tiebreak matches and stats similar to that esque. Obviously, no altitude here, that plays a big part. Whether the surface is probably fairly similar, and the altitude is the key figure there, is probably fair to say. And I think certainly the matches we've talked about, those conditions, I'd hope favour the players we've spoken of in our favour. So conditions perhaps without the altitude fairly similar, but obviously sea level here, so no altitude to come into play. So I think that's the main difference, being not quite as quick.
One more match to look at on the men's side, and I thought this one was quite interesting. Fabian Marozsan plus 180, Joao Fonseca, the bright young thing from Brazil, minus 235. Spread 3.5 games, totals 22.5, so pretty high again. Fonseca, he won Buenos Aires in February, but things haven't quite gone his way in Europe. Lost in straight sets to Tommy Paul in Madrid. He then went to Estoril for the Challenger and went down his straight sets to Dutchman Jesper de Jong in his opener. Whereas Marozsan had a good run in Munich, fell to eventual winner Alex Zverev. He then lost his Madrid opener to Flavio Cobolli. But the reason why I thought this match was really interesting, because some of you will remember a couple of years ago, Marozsan played some absolutely spectacular tennis to beat Carlos Alcaraz here. And I can't help but feel Fonseca looks a bit short here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Rory. I actually watched Marozsan lose to Cobolli in Madrid, and I'm not sure. I can't imagine there's that many players, certainly watching from the telly, that look like they hit the ball much harder than Marozsan does. He doesn't leave anything behind. No. And Cobolli just kept getting the ball back and not frustrating him, but you hit 5 or 6 furious shots, and then just the unforced error would creep in. It'd be a fascinating game. Perhaps Fonseca losing into De Jong there in Estoril. Maybe he's, even at this early stage, he's almost a big game player now, isn't he? He's playing on decent courts in front of big crowds, and perhaps just dropping to that level, the adrenaline wasn't quite up and he wasn't quite at his best. So maybe he needs sort of scenes like this now, and that would be fairly fair, because being Brazilian, he's going to have fans wherever he goes, I think. And yeah, if you're watching one match tomorrow, this looks a cracker, doesn't it? I think Marozsan, like you said, the price is there. I thought he was probably just a bit overpriced, because still a little bit to prove Fonseca. That match against Tommy Paul, I think I'm not the only person to say he probably had every chance to win that match, and Paul got it done in a couple of tight sets. So yeah, certainly a great match to watch. And if you're having a little bit of value somewhere, I'd look at Marozsan as probably being that value play.
So there you have it. Marozsan against Fonseca, perhaps the pick of tomorrow's matches. If it is tomorrow, it could actually be Thursday because we haven't seen the order of play yet. But those were the ones we liked from the men's first round. Should just bring you up to date with some notable wagers placed on Tuesday. Leah Jean money line -133 against Emiliana Arango. $8,725 placed on that. That was a loser, unfortunately, for the punter there. $5,000 on Lulu Sun to beat Georgia Pedoni. That was actually to win set 2 game 4. That was -223. That was a winner. $3,000 on Sebastian Offner to win set 2 game 1 against Yannick Hanfmann at -435. That was a winner. And I'm guessing this might be the same punter because it was $2,500 on Sebastian Offner to win 0.8 of the first set tiebreak against Yannick Hanfmann at -217. That was a winner. And Hayley Baptiste, who I mentioned earlier, 2,500 on her to win on the money line at -233 against Jill Teichmann. That was also a winner. You mentioned that Norrie Lajovic match earlier, Tim, and all the money well, most of the money, 57% of the money and 89% of the tickets were on Norrie, and on the spread, 90% of the money and 76% of the tickets were on Norrie as well. So it just goes to show that that was a bit of an upset. Should note that the match in play right now between Barrios Vera and Valentin Royer, I think that's still going with serve in the deciding set. Just bring you up to date with that. Yeah, well, this 8th game has gone on quite a long time because Barrios Vera, he's at advantage, still 3-4. But there has been quite a bit of money on that match. 85% of the money on Barrios Vera on the money line and 78% of the tickets on Royer. So a bit of a split there. And on the spread, 57% of the money on Barrios Vera and 55% of the tickets on Royer. And overs and unders, almost all the money and almost all the tickets on overs games, which would have cashed because they're deep into a 3rd set. There was also quite a bit of money and a big upset. Juan Manuel Cerundolo losing to Seng Chun Sin from Chinese Taipei, from Taiwan. Almost all the money and the tickets were on the Argentinian, and plenty of money for him on the spread, but he went out in the first round in a bit of an upset. Now, Tim, I've got some bad news for you, because your first bet on Errani, someone's obviously placed a massive bet on it already because that's gone into -117.
Okay.
So your daily double's a bit diminished, sadly. Luckily, Lehecka against Muller over 2.5 sets is still +140. No one's had time to get on that yet. So your daily double pays +346, which is quite tidy.
Okay, hopefully we can take that. Hopefully we can follow up last week. So it'd be nice with Goff doing us a favour against Swiatek at the end of last week.
Oh, you had Goff on the money line, did you?
We had Goff on the money line. I think we had overs in Cerundolo and I think it was Mensik. Cerundolo actually took a 2nd set tiebreak to get that done, so that was quite fortunate. But luckily that cashed. And just looking at Iga, Rory, obviously you're a WTA sort of specialist. Are we going to see her get going anytime soon, or is this slump going to continue?
Well, if she's going to get going, it's going to be here on slow clay courts. But I just couldn't back her at the moment, just the way she's playing. And even last week, before she lost to Goff, she bageled Diana Schneider, and then got pegged back and had to really battle. Beg your pardon, she bageled Schneider, and then Schneider came back. And then against Keys, she got bageled by Keys, and then had to come back. And then obviously she was taken apart by Coco Gauff. And I was saying to Nigel when we were looking ahead on the futures that, well, one, the aura of invincibility's gone, so that's a bad thing. But also, I think players have, found a way to. I think they're kind of cramping her for room a bit because she's so good at generating power with, on both wings when she's got a bit of width. but I think players are tending to, and I think I noticed it first. Andreeva, when she beat her in Dubai, she played a lot of balls straight flat down the middle to her, almost into the body, and just giving Świątek a little bit less time. And we know her forehand, a bit like Goff, is quite an exaggerated forehand. It takes some preparation and delivery. So that shot can be a weakness at times. And against Goff, it wasn't very good at all. So I think there's that. She did have that drugs ban, of course, for a month. And I think that's, psychologically and mentally, as much as anything, that's affected her. She hasn't reached a final since Roland Garros last year, which is just incredible.
Yeah, you'd got good odds on that, wouldn't you, a year ago? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one thing in her favour this week, I think she's got quite a nice draw in Rome. We discussed it, Nigel and myself, and the bottom half is definitely weaker than the top. But if she gets past everyone, she could face Ostapenko in the semi-finals, and we know she's got an 0-6 record against.
Let's hope they both get there, yeah, so we can see that again. Yeah, take 7, yeah.
It could be, and so I think she was $2 or $2.50 outright.
Yes, plenty short. I think, like you said, a lot of players will believe they can beat her now, won't they? Whereas that probably wasn't the case 12 months ago. Certainly, players such as Diana Schneider, having seen these players beat her, and having taken a set of her, they will now think, okay, I can beat you now, and that they wouldn't have thought that 12 months ago, would they?
Yeah, and obviously her losing to Alexandre Iala in Miami, massive shock, one of the biggest shocks in tennis for years, I'd say.
And then also losing a set to Hong Clay as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. In Madrid, and for a while it looked, she was in deep trouble there in that second set.
Again, that just wouldn't have happened 12 months ago, would it? In my eyes, yeah.
No, exactly. So, no, Świątek definitely on something of a redemption mission here, and she's a defending champion. I think she's going for her 3rd title in 4 years. I could be wrong, but she's
I think the only other time she was injured in the final set with Lena Rybakina, so you could almost say she's last 4 years she's won here. So if she's ever going to get back on track, it's going to have to be now, because I think if she doesn't do it now, then there will be serious doubts about her going into to try and win a 5th Roland Garros.
Yeah, and as Nigel said, if Sabalenka was to win in Rome, she could be favourite for Roland Garros. It's very good chance of a flip flop. I think Świątek's plus 160 and Sabalenka's plus 225 at the moment. If Sabalenka, she hasn't won Rome before. She did get to the final last year, but if she was to win it, she could be the new Roland Garros favourite, which would be just incredible. Yeah. Just need to bring you up to date with the match in progress. Royer broke for 5-3, but Barrios Vera has a break point. It's 30-40 on the Royer serve. Barrios Vera $4 to win the match. Royer minus 625. As I say that, Barrios Vera has broken for 4-5. So we're back on serve. Barrios Vera now plus 170 to complete the comeback. Royer minus 235. 4-5 in the final set. Of course, you can bet in play on that match and watch it live on Bet Rivers. I'll just run through your daily double again quickly. Actually, you give us it, Tim. Tell us your daily double. I might have to correct you on the price, but
yeah, you might have to correct me on the price. I think we lost a bit of value with the we've gone from minus 109 to minus 117. Was it?
That's correct. Yes.
So yeah, that's Sara Errani to have under 6.5 total games against Naomi Osaka, and over 2.5 sets in the Jiri Lehecka match at plus 140 against Alexandre Muller. Just remember, if you have a bet on either of those matches, you can bet live and watch live with Bet Rivers.
My mistake. I pressed the wrong one. It's still minus 109. You're right.
Oh,
you were
okay,
right.
Then.
It's still minus 109. I pressed overs for some silly
reason.
I've
got the parlay at plus 361.
Correct. So there you go. The daily double, the corrected daily double. My mistake completely. Under 6.5 games for Errani, minus 109. Over 2.5 sets, Jiri Lehecka against Alexandre Muller at plus 140. The daily double pays plus 361. So hopefully that will come in for us. Thanks very much, Tim, for your company as always. I think I'm going to say I'm with you next week, but I'm not sure I am. I think there's been a little schedule change. I think I'm with Nigel next week. We'll be
I think I've
reunited.
switched from back to Monday next week. So I think
Yes.
I'm with Mitch and you're with Nigel, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, look forward to that, and we'll be in the sort of second half of this tournament, and looking forward to who's still in and who's not.
Oh, before we go, Tim, any thoughts on who might win? Just give us quickly who you think will win the men's and the women's events here in Rome.
I mean, interesting. If I had to choose one, it's probably going to be Sabalenka. She looks the most complete player on the women's tour at the moment, who probably has the least amount of questions to answer. Can she go back to back in the Masters events? We've seen it done already before. I think it was her birthday today, so she's probably going to a couple of days off celebrating that. But I think we know she's going to be straight back to business. So again, probably a short price favourite. But if you had to choose one of the two, I'd be far keener on Sabalenka than Iga Swiatek at this time of play. And in the men's, a fantastic event to watch. I think obviously with Sinner with the comeback. I think we've spoken about he's never been past the quarterfinals here. Obviously, he's probably a more complete player now, but he has these clouds following him around with the drugs, and obviously hasn't played for 3 months. But you'd like to think a little bit of rust. Home support is obviously going to be huge for him. But if I had to choose one, do you know what? I listened to a few people this week leaning towards Musetti, and I thought he was probably a value play. He's not going to be thinking about too far ahead. Roland Garros, this is probably a huge event for him on home soil, playing some great tennis of his life. And I thought he was probably a fair price in the men's. So yeah, Musetti in the men's for me. That's where I'd be going.
$25 if you like Tim's pick there for the men's outright. Thanks again, Tim. Thanks for joining us. Leave your comments below and let us know who you think is going to be victorious in Rome. And of course, catch the Game Bet Match show with Sean and Nigel, recorded a little bit earlier today. I think Sean's in Rome at the moment and Nigel's going to take over from him at the weekend. So we should be getting plenty of stuff back from them, and of course on social media at Because We Win. Thanks again for your company on Betting Weekly Tennis Live. I won't be back tomorrow. I don't think Tim will either, but we'll have a new team in place looking ahead and looking at the in-play action at the Rome Masters. From all of us here, thanks very much, and we'll see you again soon.